Namaste. Oh, goodness. I am so glad to be here with you talking about decisions. Business owners, as business owners, we make countless decisions every day. Heck, as people, we make countless decisions every day. But how do we strike the right balance between logic and intuition? Well, stick around because today we're going to be diving into the yin and yang of head versus heart when it comes to entrepreneurship. If this is your first time joining us, whether you're watching live on LinkedIn, watching on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast platform, I am Gloria Grace, the light messenger and spiritual business coach. And as an entrepreneur since 2009, I have weighed plenty of decisions, such as, whether to invest in a coaching program or some other course to help my business, or even hiring an assistant. And so that meant deciding whether the benefits outweighed the cost in most occasions. And I'll be honest, sometimes I made the wrong decision, especially early on before I started learning to trust my intuition. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Let's talk about, why do I say yin and yang? Well, for those of you, I'm sure you've probably heard of it, but yin and yang is this ancient Chinese concept that is all about balance. So yang is masculine energy. So that's really the logical, analytical side, which in business is related to numbers, strategy, systems, structure. And yin, on the other side, is the feminine. It's that softer, intuitive aspect. And with business, that's about knowledge, discovery, playing with ideas. So together, they create the perfect harmony. And let's kind of talk about this a little bit more, and let's go into detail. So logic, numbers. Numbers are an important part of business. We've got to keep track of sales and expenses to make sure that we're profitable. So knowing that, keeping track of our data, that is the logic side of things. Now, intuition, on the other hand, that's really your inner compass. That's that gut feeling that guides you when logic doesn't have all the answers. So think about, when was the last time perhaps you had a hunch about something? And if you follow that hunch, it turned out to be the smart move, right? And I can tell you, I've had hunches that when I ignored them, turned out to, as I say, bite me in the butt. So that's one of the reasons I've learned to start following my intuition. And some of the most famous entrepreneurs in the world trust their intuition. In fact, they really rely on their intuition. And for one, Oprah Winfrey is one example. She said that the only time she's actually made mistakes in her business is when, and in her life, I think too, but definitely I think in her business, is when she didn't listen to her intuition. And Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Empire, he says he relies actually far more on gut instinct than researching huge amounts of statistics. And of course, he's been in business for quite a while. He's a whiz at what he does. So for small business owners like you and me, I'm not advocating that you ignore number crunching. You really still have to be aware of that. So you do have to be careful not to follow your heart 100% of the time. It's this dance. We've really got to have this lovely dance between our head and our heart. And so, for instance, my business before I started really coaching, it was a copywriter. And as an SEO copywriter in particular, that was where I would use the logical side of my brain to find the right words for my copy, and then use my heart to actually then translate into content for my clients that would help them to be able to attract their ideal clients. And put it another way, when I was writing content and still do actually, I'm appealing to the emotions of my prospect, but then you back it up with testimonials and other data to help someone actually justify the purchase. Because what, as they say, it's like we buy on emotion, but we justify it with logic. And so that's, again, see that heart and head going together. Now, at the same time, you also don't want to just go the other end of the scale. You don't want to be 100% heart, but you don't want to be necessarily 100% head, operating from that logic, analytical side, like old lovely Data in Star Trek Next Generation. You want to be able to, well, let me say, if you're only operating from the logical side, that is not allowing for ingenuity and is not allowing for inspiration to set you apart from the competition. And the sweet spot is when we can really balance logic and intuition. So it's about knowing when to crunch the numbers. Okay, let's say, for instance, here's a wonderful program that I want to invest in. Do I have the funds to do it? And if I do, and say, okay, great, then I'm going to go ahead and invest in it. So it's about following that path. And I will tell you sometimes, so I'm going to contradict myself here a little bit, because sometimes I have invested in something that really was really expensive and I couldn't technically afford it. So, but I did it anyway. And that was a time where I really was leaning on my instinct. And this was when I invested in a mastermind. Oh, let's see, going back probably about 8 years now, I think. And I just felt, after going through the presentation, listening to all of the people talking about this program, I just knew in my heart of hearts that this was what I needed. It was absolutely, I knew it. I knew it was expensive. I would have to figure out a way to pay for it. But I had to do it. I knew that if I passed it by, that I would regret it. And so sometimes you do have to do that. And I am very grateful that I invested in it, because it absolutely turned out to be one of the best investments I've ever made in my business. It was absolutely expensive, but it was worthwhile, and it's paid dividends over and over again in the years since. So again, it's, in that sense, I didn't necessarily, I sort of veered more on like Oprah's side, really following my intuition as opposed to the numbers, or even Richard Branson as well. But for the most part, I do strive to keep it in balance. And speaking of balance, if you are loving this content, I hope you will let me know in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed to us on your favorite podcast platform, or definitely those of you watching, please subscribe on YouTube at Gloria Grace Rand. Okay, so I've talked a little bit now about why it's good to balance the heart and the head, logic and intuition in business. But let's get practical. What does that really look like in practical terms? Especially, well, actually, I've done that, but how do we cultivate it? That's what I wanted to say. How do we cultivate both your intuition and your logical side? So for enhancing intuitive thinking, hands down, the best technique for doing that is meditation. And I've talked about meditation on the program before. You can go back in and find some of the episodes. In fact, I think I did one not too long ago, maybe even a few weeks ago, actually. Relax and to allow inspiration to come through from your higher self. So that's one way that you can do it. The other is, let's say you're maybe you've got a decision to make and you're not quite sure. Maybe it works out financially, you can afford it. Great. But you're not 100% sure that this is the right step for you to take for your business. What I recommend you do is to journal about it. Ask a question and say, okay, should I, why would this program, let's say, be a good investment for my business? And just maybe just even keep asking that question over and over again, and let your intuition tell you why it is a good, or why it may not be a good use of your money. Because of course you can do the pros and cons. And again, that's the logical side of laying things out. But ultimately, let's say the pros and cons come out equal. Now you're like, okay, now what the heck do I do? That's where you go into your intuition. That's where you've got to trust your gut. Ask your gut and say, hey, what do I want to do? What should I do? How is this the right decision for me to make? And if it's fear is coming up for you, then maybe it's not the right decision right now. Maybe it's later. That's okay too. But if you sit with it a little bit and just say, okay, is this really fear? Or maybe it's not fear. It could be just a little nervousness about stepping outside of your comfort zone. And if that's the case, then I would journal about that a little bit more and say, is this just me not wanting to step out of my comfort zone? And then maybe even explore what would be the best outcome of this, and what would be the worst outcome of this if I did this. That helps a lot, I found, in asking, what's the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? And again, see what your higher self says to you about this, because that might be exactly what you needed to do to find out and say, okay, that's what I need to do. This is why I should move forward. How do you sharpen your logical reasoning? Well, believe it or not, one of the best ways to do that is through creativity. Absolutely. Engage in some sort of creative activity, whether it's painting or drawing or playing music, something that gets your creative juices going, because that actually helps your logical brain work more effectively. And I had one of my guests on the show earlier this year was Naomi Barish, and she's she's in business, but she also creates mixed media collages. And so check out that episode, because it's really, we talked about how it benefits her in her personal life and in her professional life. Another thing you could try learning a new skill or a new language. I'm currently attempting to learn Hungarian through Duolingo. And it's because that's my heritage. My grandparents were both born in Hungary, but it's a very challenging language. I should really just go back to Spanish, because I think I'd be able to. I had Spanish in school. I'm sure it would probably be a lot easier to learn that one, but I do like the challenge, so I'm sticking with it. One other thing to keep in mind. One last tip related to deciding between your head and your heart, and using that in business, is if you're trying to make a decision, and if it has a higher risk and a high reward, then it may be worth it actually leaning into your intuition to make the decision. But if it's low risk, then that's when you can just say, okay, I'll just follow a more logical approach and just say, okay, do I have the time? Do I have the money to invest in this? And just do it that way. So I hope that's been helpful for you today with this. And one last thing I want to share with you related to intuition that I think also helps to be able to stress the importance of intuition, actually, is what I want to do. So I read, one of my spiritual practices that I do besides meditating is reading the Daily Word from Unity. And so I always love to use share one of those readings on when I do these solo episodes. And so today's is I searched for the word intuition, and sure enough, I found a reading. And this is from January 25th, 2006. And so these readings, they always start with an affirmation. And the affirmation is, through intuition, I am making insightful, perceptive discoveries. So think about that. Through intuition, I am making insightful, perceptive discoveries. And then the reading says, before making a decision, I may first gather all the facts and data available. The price and features of a car or a house or a can of beans make a difference in my daily life, and my personal desires matter also. However, I have another vital resource of information: spiritual intuition. Before coming to a conclusion, I take a few moments to release my thoughts and feelings and go within. Here, I meditate on the choices available to me, and I listen for the inspiration that comes from God. What a joy it is to discover that spiritual intuition is revealing a way that had never before occurred to me. I'm not surprised, however, at such a discovery. I have tapped into a spiritual wisdom that is always a part of me and ready to lead me. And then these readings always end with a line from scripture, and this is from Isaiah 43:19. It says, I am about to do a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? So the lesson here today is the really the head and the heart, the yin and the yang. We need both. We need the logical, excuse me, we need the logical side of our brains, and we need to rely on our heart. There are, there's so many expressions, follow your heart and go with your gut. And we come up with these expressions because there's wisdom in it. I mean, in fact, actually, I think I wrote in my book, Live, Love, Engage, about a study that's been done where the heart actually has brain cells, if you will, and there's neurons in there. And so listening to your heart really is tapping into a higher wisdom. So it's not just this wonderful organ that pumps blood in us. There is intelligence in the heart as well as in the head. So we need both of them in order to be productive business people, in order to live fully, to love deeply in our lives. So I encourage you to do that. Now, I mentioned earlier that meditation is one of it's my favorite, all-time best practice for helping to cultivate intuition. There's another one too. And this is one that I've been doing for the last few years. Meditation I've been doing for, 15 years now, I think. Yeah, at least 15 years now. But this other practice I've been doing for about 3 years now. But it's also wonderful for helping you to strengthen your intuition because it's about, again, connecting with source. So this is something that I love to share on the podcast with you, is something called light language. And light language is a form of communication that speaks to your soul, speaks to your heart. And it is something that I'm able to channel from angelic realms, from galactic realms, basically from source. And it's a language of love. It's energy, it's vibration. And when you listen to it, as well as when you actually are able to transmit it as well, it raises your vibration. It helps. It also calms you down as well at the same time. So it's a very relaxing modality. It's a healing modality. But it helps you to connect with your higher self, which is when you become more connected, that is how you strengthen your intuition, because that's what intuition ultimately really is. I should have looked up the specific definition, but to me, intuition is a way of tapping into higher knowledge, higher wisdom. And that's why I say you do it through meditation, but also through light language. So, what I would love to do for you right now is to share a light language message for you. And I invite you, if you're listening to this right now or watching it somewhere where you're multitasking, you will receive the benefits of it so much better if you can stop whatever else you're doing, take a break if you need to, and come back and listen to this later or watch it later. But I really strongly encourage you to be somewhere where you can just sit, close your eyes, and treat it as if it were a meditation. And just allow what comes through me, which is typically it's either spoken, or sometimes it's in the form of a song, or sometimes it goes back and forth. Just depends on what spirit feels that you need to hear today, and also what I need to hear as well. So what I do is I will set the intention that the message that we are about to receive is for our soul's highest good and the highest good of all concerned. And that, I invite you to just set an intention that truly what you receive will help you. Perhaps it is helping you to strengthen your intuition, and so that you can go about your day making informed, wonderful decisions that will be for your benefit and the benefit of all concerned. So I invite you now to just sit back, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and allow the message to come through. Oya no kaye, onaku kayo no koyate, oye koso, ahone ka, ayo no kiya, soku saya no koye, sakoye kofuye, Sano yakohu, soshano koyadaki, hanoko patofu, ayata salyono kui, kokayono kahune haeka. Shonokoria toshanoki, konya nakalata koni kaho, asikoyaku, saku sheanaka yapachi amnaka, hanaka yapatu niamakaliata, ekanakulia patokoya toshikata koma, ekanianokoshia tokoya patakosha totunka. Oyo no koe patanki ta shiko to kushap mamana kia ta. Oto to kohi pa ni ato kolia patakonia trishiko wima. E ono koshita e ka patarija ta korea pata. Ana korea poto kuiata. E kane no kolia patakushia kataka. O kayo no kohu kahona ue. Ano kia to e kohu ato kika. Ana yokuya, asoyo no kua, adyodo kayo no kofu, asiyo shodo, akayofu. Blessings for you today. Oh, that felt good for me. I hope I hope it felt as good for you receiving it today. And I am I love sharing this practice. It is really made such a wonderful difference in my life. And if you would ever like to have a just to get some more information about it. If you're curious about it, you want to learn more about it. At some point in the future, I may do offer some specific either group or one-on-one activations, but definitely hook me up, look me up, go to engagewithgloria.com. That's engagewithgloria.com and schedule a call with me. It takes you right to my calendar on my website and let's have a chat about it. I'd love to talk with you about it if you're curious about it. If you have any other questions or any comments again about today's episode, please feel free to again. You can reach out to me there. You can reach out on LinkedIn. You can reach out on YouTube. You can go to my website, which is gloriarand.com. And I would love to be able to have a conversation with you. So I think that's going to do it for this edition of Live, Love, Engage. And until next time, go out today and every day and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.